I don't think they could have ever imagined, as they seem to have believed, that a few days or weeks of airstrikes would bring them victory in this case. A very, very foolish prediction, which I don't think was shared by their professional intelligence estimators or their military. I think they could only have arrived at such a foolish calculation by their wishful desire to have a victory before the 50th anniversary of NATO, and not to have an embarrassing situation in the Balkans during that celebration. So that totally irrelevant timetable, I think, strongly warped their sense of what was feasible and what was legitimate to do. And hopefully the unsuccess they've had, the dramatic fiasco that has resulted in terms of their inability to protect the Kosovar people from who were supposedly the purpose of the operation. In the face of that, I think they're now turning for help where they should have turned in the first place for both authority and help. I say back to the UN and to Russia. The OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, should also not have been bypassed in this instance, and their ability for, after all, they were turned to provide the monitors in October, and a crucial error, a very worthy goal, and they have they're set up with professional mediators, professional people for conflict resolution, monitors, observers, none of which NATO is designed to do as a military alliance. That was the appropriate presence there, not NATO, and it was a terrible error to have withdrawn the 2,000 OSCE monitors in favor of preparations for bombing. That exposed directly the people of Kosovo to a kind of ethnic cleansing which would have been almost unthinkable to do in the presence of those monitors. So it drastically reduced their safety. And we should learn a lesson from that. So the approach of the OSCE and the UN, cooperation with the UN, I think has been strongly validated here, in contrast to the very notion which the President and Prime Minister Blair and others preferred, which was to turn to military means and to a military alliance headed, after all, by the not only the richest, most industrialized countries, but specifically the former imperial powers, or the currently imperial powers in the case of the U.S., which are hardly representative of the world, at least of all the southern hemisphere and the third world. And where the UN, with all its limitations and its faults and its shortcomings, which are many, just cannot be substituted for by some small group of Western industrialized power when it comes to authorizing military force, especially not in situations of self-defense. So there are a number of lessons here to be drawn, all of which in the other direction from the way that the leaders of NATO were trying to lead the world.
Dan, you mentioned the illegality, the illegalness of this war, and here in the United States we know that in our Constitution, that would be Article 1, Section 8, it stipulates that Congress and Congress alone shall have the power to declare war. We know that Bill Clinton has bypassed this the same way that he bypassed the United Nations Security Council, which, he's violated a lot of law, both domestic law and international law. We know of a movement now to instigate a lawsuit challenging the legal aspects of this war. Jules Lobel, who is a professor of constitutional and international law at the University of Pittsburgh, is being joined with another attorney by the name of Michael Ratner, and he's an attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York City. And they cite that the recent vote against the war in Yugoslavia in the Congressional House of Representatives, the U.S. body of the House of Representatives, the vote failed on account of 200 to 213. That fails to give the president the constitutional right required to carry on the war against Yugoslavia. And Lobel and Michael Ratner also say that this is an impeachable offense. So we have a serious legal crisis now within this country. We know we've just come off the other impeachment. I wonder if you'd comment on that a little bit.
I wish I could say that we had a serious legal crisis here, an impeachment crisis. That would imply, very strong forces for the enforcement of the Constitution and for international law and for our laws in this country. And I'm afraid, although there are voices for that, such as you've mentioned, they are not as strong as I wish they were. I don't think the legal aspects of this constitute a crisis for this president any more than other unconstitutional and acts that should have been impeachable really form a crisis for the presidents who prosecuted Vietnam and so forth. I would like this to be a country in which that created real problems for a president to behave so illegally, but it isn't yet that, any more than the world is a place where international law is a very strong constraint on the behavior of powerful states. I would like to bring that about, but it isn't yet. The violation of the actual written Constitution and the UN Charter and the framework of international law that does exist, the violation in this case is clear enough. And that's also rather often true. This should be an instance in which people should step back and realize that a framework which deterred us or inhibited us from the fiasco and the military means which have so much worsened the situation so far, both in Serbia and Kosovo, is worth taking seriously and not to be disregarded lightly in the future. Taking these rules seriously, such as the authority of the UN, could have saved us and saved a lot of lives in Kosovo and the refugees and the lives in Serbia. And that should be seen as a reason for strengthening them, turning more, relying more on this framework of international law instead of what the U.S. has always preferred since the early days of the Cold War, essentially a kind of vigilante or posse mentality of armed elements that just make their own law on the basis of might makes right, and we are the mightiest of the countries. I saw one American official once quoted as, can't give the name at this moment, as saying, international law protects the weak, and we are not the weak. In other words, it's not really in our interest to be bound by this. Well, it's in no one's interest for the U.S. and NATO to have acted as it has been acting in the 40 days. No one. I think a reality in this situation we have to keep a grip on is the extreme futility of the military actions which, like all military actions, have been homicidal, which have been killing humans there, but killing them to no good end that anyone can point to. Or that had any prospect of achieving. Many Americans and many people in the world would say that an action like this, which is not authorized, which is illegal, which fits the definition of aggressive war, is nevertheless justified in the face of actions that are not only illegal but highly damaging to life, highly harmful, evil actions of massive ethnic cleansing or massacre, and that faced with that if the only way to stop that is with an illegal action of some kind, then that has to be accepted and it justifies it. That's the way I think many people are supporting these actions right now.